Betterment customers believe technology can improve their daily lives. Use Uber, Netflix, and Amazon. Betterment customers are just like you. Betterment aims to make it straightforward. Create an account, tell them your financial situation, and their advice platform will build you a personalized portfolio for your goals and desired levels of risk, like, for instance, overthrowing the patriarchy. For each goal, retirement, house down payment, overthrowing the patriarchy, you determine how aggressive or conservative you'd like to be. Based on this information, we'll take care of the underlying investments and can implement tax-saving strategies. What if you currently have a financial advisor or want more confidence that you're doing the right thing? Well, Betterment has a team of certified financial planners and licensed financial experts in-house, ready to discuss your unique situation when you need them. And another nice thing about Betterment has tools and calculators that give you an idea of what your investment strategy could look like. There is always risk in investing. However, with Betterment, we help you avoid the emotion and sales tactics that often plague the financial industry. Investment involves risk. But for a limited time, and listeners can get 1 month managed for free. For information, visit betterment.com/withfriends. Again, that's betterment.com/withfriends. Betterment, investing made better. Hi, I'm Anna Marie Cox. Welcome to With Friends Like These, a product of the Crooked Media Company. It is Friday, and it is a regularly scheduled episode of Crooked Friends. We had a bonus episode drop earlier in the week with my friend Jason Linkins. I encourage you to check that out. And also, welcome to those people who might have discovered us last week with this crossover episode I did with John Moe. That has turned out to be a very prolific episode in terms of the feedback we're getting. I want to thank everybody who's written in. I have not been able to get back to everybody, but I will give it a shot. This week, we are kind of back to some regularly scheduled stuff, more traditionally awkward and uncomfortable conversations and differences. In the second part of the show, I talked to Brandy Jensen about Ivanka. It's sort of a very literal with friends like these, in terms of with friends like Ivanka, do feminists need enemies? That is a fun conversation. There's a lot of Ivanka stuff coming out. We shoot through a bunch of it. And then up first, Ben Howe. Ben Howe is a never-Trumper from early days. He is a contributor at Red State and has a book coming out called The Immoral Majority, which it sounds like it's going to be a continuation of some of the conversations that we had today, which is about his departure from the conservative movement and what we as liberals might have to learn from the Tea Party's successes and their mistakes. Welcome to the show, Ben Howe, senior contributor for Red State and the author of an upcoming book, which I guess we're going to have to talk about, called The Immoral Majority. How are you, Ben?
That's right. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've wanted to talk to you. Now I realize it's almost exactly a year that I've been wanting to talk to you.
That's right. I think that you and I have been communicating for a long time.
Yes. And I've always enjoyed our exchanges. But what got my attention, and I guess a lot of people's attention, was almost exactly a year ago. You wrote a piece for Red State. Why don't you tell me about the piece you wrote for Red State, which was entitled, sure. I think the people can probably get the idea of it. I lied to myself for years about who my allies were. No more.
Right. Well, basically, I had reached sort of a tipping point primarily because of the nomination of Donald Trump. I think people have the ability to look past a lot and lie to themselves a lot in order to keep moving forward in what they think is overall the right thing. And that's what I was doing for a long time. So I had a lot of things I believed with the conservative movement and with the Republican Party, but I had to look past certain things and red flags in order to keep on that track. But once it all exploded in my face, because people were actually actively supporting a man that I thought was not only the antithesis of everything that I'd been fighting for, but was just generally a crappy person. I started to observe, okay, well, who is it that's out there really hardcore supporting this guy? And I came to the sad conclusion that these were all, like, to the man, it was every person that I had thought, wow, that person's got a little bit of a different view on things than I do, they were the ones out there supporting him. And all the pundits that I had looked at and said, sometimes I really hate what Ann Coulter says. Sometimes I really hate what Laura Ingraham says. And, oh, what do you know? They happen to be Trump supporters. So the piece was generally me saying, I should not have taken part in excusing bad behaviors, despite what I thought I was doing right. It's irrelevant, because what I did really was I helped elevate all of these bad people, and then ultimately a really bad guy who was running for president and was probably going to win, and then turned out did win.
And I want to kind of separate our conversation to two things. I mean, it may seem weird to people that we're talking about a piece that was written a year ago. So I definitely want to talk about actually what's happened for you in the aftermath of that piece.
Sure.
But first, I feel like I need to point out that what made your piece different for me from a lot of other, never Trump screeds, and there were a lot of really good ones written. And as someone who's opposed to Trump, I felt a lot of, righteous indignation. Feels awesome, like when you're reading someone who you sort of disagree with come to your side. And like, I think a lot of liberals kind of felt that way, like, yeah, even this guy realizes it. But what I thought was interesting about your piece was that it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't just a denunciation of Trump. It was something about Trump that made you rethink your allies in general. Like the way that I'd been describing your piece, which is it's not an exact quote but I believe I get your gist, is that you had, you were sort of coming to grips with the fact that you had allied yourself with like racists and greedheads because you agreed with each other on marginal tax rates.
Right, because there's this thing, and I think that everybody to some degree does this, and I was definitely doing it, which is, we use this word fringe at different times and in different ways. And sometimes you use fringe to excuse things that are uncomfortable. So for me, I would use the word fringe to describe uncomfortable allies. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, so-and-so is just part of the fringe. Those guys are fringe. It's not representative, and so on and so forth. And that's hard to continue to do once the fringe and I just literally did air quotes, by the way, so you can't see them. But what you can't still call them the fringe if they basically take over one of the two major political parties and have a chance at sitting in the White House. They're not fringe anymore. And most of what I was writing about during that time period, and I would say in a lot of ways have continued to write, that this was a moment where conservatives and Republicans, to a lesser degree, but conservatives mostly, had to decide who they are. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them did decide. A lot of them decided that if 4 out of 10 objectives can be hit, or even if 6 out of 10 objectives can be hit, and even if they're hitting those by allying themselves with unsavory, horrible people, hey, at least the things they wanted happened. And I think that that's, in terms of American politics and governance and everything that's gone wrong in the country over the last 100 years, it's always that short-term thinking that's taking hold. And now it's gotten to a point where people are willing to work with trash in order to achieve their short-term objectives. And I'm just not.
And that's where we get into the second part of what I want to talk to you about, which is the aftermath of this piece. Mm-hmm. To contextualize, at the time you wrote this piece, you have a consulting business. You mm-hmm. used to work for the Heritage Foundation, which is, one of the flagship think tanks mm-hmm. on the right. Contributor at Red State. Mm-hmm. Man about town in D.C.
That's right. They throw parties in my honor all the time.
Yes. What was the reaction to this piece for you?
Well, it's interesting because at first, I think that a lot of people, intellectually aligned with what I was saying. And that's when it's easy to agree with what I was saying for a conservative. Because there's still options. He wasn't the nominee yet. There was this, free the delegates effort that was happening. there was a lot of unrest in the party. It didn't seem like Paul Ryan perhaps was even going to sign on. Reince seemed like he was polishing off a fifth of vodka every night. Like, it just seemed like it was a bad
He actually
around.
was pouring Baileys on his Wheaties or whatever it is that he said.
Right, exactly. And so I think that to some extent there was a lot of mixed support. You know, I think the only thing that people really never had any patience for was that I said I would prefer Hillary over Trump. That nobody seemed to have much patience for that. But once he became the nominee, it changed pretty dramatically and pretty quickly. And it no longer became that I had a actual principled position. It was now that I had sour grapes and that I was being stubborn and all this other stuff. And my reply at the time was, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, basically what you're saying is your principles last all the way up until the point where you're worried about your party, which means you're, by definition, putting your party above your principles, which was the entire objection to Trump in the first place. So are you saying you wanted principles over party until what? The party was in danger and then suddenly it switches back? So there was a lot of pushback on me at that time. And I would say since then, I'm not trying to sound like a victim. I'm doing fine.
That would that would complete your evolution to a social justice warrior if you sounded like a victim.
Right.
So,
well, but yes, there are doors and communications and friends and allies and people who even were against Trump earlier on, who now I'm something different to them. And I can live with that. I'd rather be something different and look at myself in the mirror and be okay with it. They come to me every time something happens that they know I'll agree with, because I never stopped being a conservative. So they'll come to me with something that Trump's done or some policy that's happened or some cabinet position that I might like. Oh, don't you see now? Can't you see how this is great? And I just want to smack them, because what is...
How many times have people said Gorsuch to you? Like, is that like... I
mean, that's pretty much like it's its own language now. Is just people saying Gorsuch over and over. Gorsuch.
Yeah. Gorsuch. It's like the Princess Kitty Cat, in Mr. Rogers. Yeah. Like, meow, 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 meow.
Right, it is.
Gorsuch.
And they say that, they either say that or they say, oh, because Hillary would have been better. That's their other response. Oh, because Hillary would have been better. And I usually say something along the lines of, I don't expect you to be my fan, but if you're going to criticize me, can you at least read what I wrote? I mean, I think I pretty much established that I understood from the beginning that Trump would do things that I liked, that it had nothing to do with whether or not he's a complete scumbag, which I think he is. So, they want me to change my mind on it. Like, see, this proves he's a good person. How does that prove he's a good person? It doesn't. He's doing things on advice of counsel and on advice of, people around him. But if we get a great Supreme Court nominee, how much is that going to matter when we're entangled in Syria and starting a war with North Korea and having an administration that's in a web of deceit with Russia?
Yeah.
Which is something that I do believe. And the answer is usually, yeah, but Gorsuch.
But Gorsuch. That's going to be like the new but her emails is like, that meme that's like the underwater sign, but at the top of it says but emails. I think they should do a new one that says but Gorsuch.
Exactly. Whataboutism has taken over all political discourse. Whataboutism, which is just people constantly, no matter what is happening, they say, yeah, well, what about when Obama? Well, what about when? I'm like, you know what? He's the president, okay? I don't care about Hillary's emails anymore. I don't care about what Obama did anymore. If you want to critique the media, that's fine. Write a criticism of the media and talk about an unfair coverage. I can live with that. I'm sure that that's something worth talking about. But it's not worth talking about in the context of trying to figure out if there's something to be concerned about this president.
I think it's so interesting. You've drilled into something that I think we seek to explore on this podcast, which is how much it matters whether or not someone is, I almost hate to use the term good person, because that to me, you can excuse a lot by saying, but they're a good person, like, and when they hold views or back positions that are abhorrent, but you say, but they're a good person. So I kind of want to drill down on what we're really talking about here, because like I feel like sometimes people, defend Ivanka as sort of, but she's a good person, right? And I don't care whether or not she's a good person. I'm not sure if she is, number one, and number two, I feel like her positions are more important. But you're talking about something really interesting here, which is that, Trump is a problem, not because of specific policy positions, although those are problems too. For you, it's that he's like, well, I have what I would say about him. I don't know how you want to describe him.
Well, I made a film called The Sociopath.
Right. Okay. Yes. Right. He's a venal sociopath, maniac. And that's the problem. It's not the specific positions that he holds. It's that.
No, it's not. And look, I've seen people do that a lot. So-and-so is a good person. What's interesting is nobody ever says that about Trump. His supporters. Like his supporters will like, man, Trump's the best. You know what they never say? Trump's a good person.
Yeah.
Like this just never even comes up. But no, I don't think. See, I've never been a person that subscribes to the idea that you have to be a good person to be a good politician, because the people really
or a worthy politician, right? Like, or someone that you'd vote for. Right. You don't have to be a good. I was gonna. Hey, I voted for Hillary. I'm not. I'll tell you right now. I'm not sure how good a person she is.
Right. Exactly. and I think this might be the first time that Milton Friedman's been quoted on here, but he said that it's great to elect good people, but that the real way to make change is to make it politically profitable to do the right thing. To get, because then a bad person even will do the right thing if you think it's going to politically be profitable to him. So, to some degree, that's been my mantra. I've just been like, well, yeah, I think this person's probably not somebody I'd want to hang out with, but I think that we can get them to do what we need. The problem with Trump is he's a maniac. Yeah. And I don't think that he is bound by things like what makes sense. I think that, we're lucky if we've got good people around him that will continually barrage him with what the right thing to do is. That would be a good thing, but he doesn't have that. He's got Steve Bannon, in his ear. And so it's not that I don't think that there's any chance that even though he's a scumbag, he couldn't be controlled. Sure, that's possible, but not the way things are lining up, because the way things are lining up is the Republican Party is just suddenly acting like he's the greatest thing since Reagan, and that he's this ideologue, and he's none of those things. He's none of those things. And he's easily influenced by what he perceives in a particular moment to be popular, and he mostly acts on what the last thing somebody said to him.
I know. And just out of personal pique. I mean, he really is a fucking toddler. Like, it's just an insult to toddlers to call him a toddler, but I can't, it's almost the only thing I can use to describe him, though. He's just poor impulse control and selfish. He has the ego and emotional range of a very small person.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of tweets alone of him going after people that wrote, he would go after somebody who wrote a negative blog on hellokitty.blogspot.com if he came across it. He'd put them on blast. He
would. And by the same token, his staff would take a positive post from hellokitty.blogspot.com and put it in his morning reads he would be flattered by it,
But the real danger with Trump is he's always been that way.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the things that amazes me is people go, he's going to change. He's always been this way. He's always been this way. So what's amazing, what's different now is, so 3 years ago, he would have gone after somebody who wrote that at hellokitty.blogspot.com, but nobody would have backed him up. now he's got an entire party that's like, well, no, seriously, the problem with America is hellokitty.blogspot.com. Like they'll run a whole campaign against that.
It's fake news. hellokitty.blogspot.com is fake news. That's what I have to say.
That is the most pressing matter in American politics right now is hellokitty.blogspot.com.
Who leaked to Hello Kitty? So I actually want to roll back just a little bit here because, again, like, I think one of the things that really struck me about your essay of a year ago, and something that I continue to hear from you, is actually that it's not just about Trump, though, right? That it's about the party and the movement that created the conditions for Trump. Because I'm interested, like I talked to Greg Doucette a while ago, and I think you and he and actually my husband have this in common. Stop me if I'm wrong, but it's that, all three of you, I think I would say generously, none of you fit the typical Republican profile. But considered my husband sort of, he's like, yeah, okay, I'm a social liberal conservative, fiscally. And I think Doucette more of a libertarian, whatever you can describe yourself. But what happened with all three of you was that Trump happened, and it wasn't just that you had a problem with Trump, it's that it forced you to reconsider your relationship to this whole movement.
Yes.
Which I think that's different than what's happened for a lot of never Trumpers, Like, I think...
Yes, because a lot of never Trumpers are still, they're still applying kind of the old rules to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They're still saying, yeah, but you got to support the nominee, or they're, well, you got to, and if they had never supported the nominee, once he was president, well, you got to support the president. And then when he does good things, hey, you got to support what's good and hold accountable what's bad. And I'm like, that's true. Like, it's fine to acknowledge that something you like happened. Okay. That's great. I don't feel like you have some, intense obligation to make sure to personally thank Lord Trump for it. But, I get what they're saying in that regard. But for me, the entire party apparatus, of which I'm no longer a part of, and the conservative movement at large, sort of the professional conservatives, they are the ones that I hold to a much higher standard than I even do Trump at this point, because I don't think Trump exists without them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people were looking for leadership, thought leaders, to tell them, fill in the blanks for them and say, here's all the things you should be concerned about, and here's what you should be considering, and so on and so forth. And instead, they just sort of towed this party line, which means it's really about winning elections. And beyond winning and being in power, everything else is negotiable and optional. And people who, for years, in the Tea Party and elsewhere, railed on that very concept are cheerleading it now. And so to me, it just, and I know it's judgmental and all this other stuff, it just, to me, means they're not good. They're just not good people. And I don't want to be part of a movement that's full of bad people.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and then I want to continue the conversation here with Ben Howe. We'll be right back.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
Sending flowers has always been the best way to show someone you care. I was actually visiting my in-laws over the weekend, and as we were leaving, my mother-in-law said, I know Mother's Day is coming up, but don't worry about sending flowers. I know you guys love me. And I turned around and said, Pat, you want some flowers? And she then blushed and said, well, actually, yes, I would like some flowers. So you know what? I did buy her some flowers. If she's listening to the show now, spoiler alert, Pat, you have got some Bouqs flowers coming your way. And Bouqs, the thing about Bouqs is that it's actually transparent pricing, which it's the first time I ever used them, and it's amazing. Like, they say what it's going to cost, and it costs that. There's no, add-on fees for delivery and whatnot. Other places I could name say, dozen roses, $19.99. And then when you actually check on it, to get the roses that are advertised, it's going to cost almost $100. There are hidden fees, and you have a big bill, and even bigger disappointment when your flowers show up looking different than the pictures. Bouqs.com is a better way to buy flowers. The Bouqs company offers fully transparent pricing, like I said, an easy, affordable shopping experience, an incredible curated selection of flowers starting at $40 with free weekday delivery. Each bouquet is sustainably farmed and comes straight from grower to customer, meaning your flowers last longer and cost less to buy. Need something last minute? We do offer products with next day and same day delivery. This year, show every mom in your life that you care with flowers from the Books Company. And a special offer for my listeners, which I actually personally took advantage of, order now and get 20% off with the code FRIENDS. Visit Books.com and enter the code FRIENDS for 20% off your Mother's Day purchase. That's BOUQS.com, code FRIENDS. And by the magic of podcasting, we're right back. So you're just talking about the Tea Party and how, Trump's rise and eventual victory, kind of made you reconsider the movement and whether or not you wanted to be associated with it, and how for the Tea Party and, the conservative movement, winning became the only thing, and they made moral compromises and worked with bad people in order to win. Now, I am thinking of the left because there's been a lot of self-congratulation that we are now the new Tea Party, right? Like that, woohoo, like we're taking their tactics and sticking it to them, and, rowdy town halls. And I want to say, like, I am pro-rowdy town hall. I was pro-rowdy town hall when the Tea Party did it. I like rowdy town halls just on principle, Like, I like people going and telling their elected representatives what they think and what they feel, and I feel that they should do that with whatever range of passion they have, right? But we're also kind of now having a little bit of a conversation about how important winning is and who we should make our allies with. Do you think that side of the Tea Party experience has anything to teach the left?
Oh, I think that the left is, and I've actually sort of been asked this question on a couple of different places, because I think that some on the left, like you just verbalized, are cautious as you see it unfolding. Because it sort of looks like you want to step back and go, hey, they just did that and the end result was Trump, right? Like, this just happened. And my warning has been, and I have continued to offer this warning. So when the Tea Party started, I know that there's a lot of controversy between people on the left and the right about what it was when it started. So I'm only going to be telling you what it was to me when it started, which was basically a libertarian movement. Yeah,
no, I think that's true.
We didn't even, like, when people would bring up social issues back then, like back in 2009, people would literally say, stop it. We're not here to talk about that. We're not here to talk about immigration. We're not here to talk about gay marriage. We're not here to talk about abortion. We would send people out that had abortion signs. We'd be like, get out of here. That's not what this is, and you are making it that. Because what we were interested in was just fiscal issues. That was it. But at the same time, all of these people have these different social values, and they are divisive. And as I'm sure you know, bad players know how to capitalize on that, and they did. They swooped in. They started, ringing the bell on issues that they pretty much knew were going to divide people even within the Tea Party, and start redefining what the Tea Party is. Because, doing that is an easy way to send out mailers and say, send us money so that we can fight the abortionists, instead of keeping Tea Party on what it was. And it helped elevate the birther movement, which ultimately helped elevate the Trump movement. So my warning to the left is, don't be proud of a leaderless movement. Okay? Like, we would brag about it. There is no leader. We're all the leaders. That's a bad idea. Because
we should be waving those Soros checks around. We got a leader.
Right.
Here he is.
Right. It's fine for that leader to rise up naturally and organically. I think that's a good thing. But we were flat out rejecting the idea of leaders of what, central leadership? What is this, the federal government? Like, people would get all puffy about it. And now I look back and I'm like, we probably could have used somebody that could eloquently define what we're talking about, same way Obama had just done. The same way for conservatives that Reagan had done. These are the great movement leaders were throughout history. They speak for a movement. And we didn't have that. And as a result, we had 100,000 leaders.
And then you became ripe for the picking, right? I mean, then it became easy for people like Heritage Foundation, institutions like Heritage Foundation, like Jim DeMint.
Trump.
Yeah.
He became that leader.
Yeah. And
so, y'all are going to end up with, President Simon Cowell, if y'all
Oprah.
All right, I guess, not him.
Oprah, probably.
Oprah, there you go.
Although, I mean, part of me wants to argue back, and because I think there is something to this, which is that the fundamental values of a movement matter too, right?
Sure.
That it would be hard for the left to create our version of Trump because, and I say this as a leftist because, but I do believe this, which is that I think the value system that we're working with would not put a person like Trump in charge. Now, that's not to say that that's not to say that it's perfect, but
I have two pushbacks.
Okay.
The first is you have a faith in humanity that I have lost. Okay. One of the things that I said.
True fact, yes.
I guess you underestimated Trump. I was like, no, I underestimated you.
Yeah.
It was the people that I underestimated. So that's the first thing is definitely I don't have that much faith in humanity anymore. The second thing is it's not always about, to me, whether or not Trump's values, his values happened to be scummy. Okay, but that's not the entirety of what made him dangerous. What makes him dangerous is that he's plastic. He's not real. He has no core ideology. He has no specific, agenda other than self-serving.
Right. I was going to say, what makes him dangerous is that he does have one value, which is himself. That's what makes him dangerous.
Right.
It's not that he's plastic. Even if he was totally plastic, that would make him a sociopath still. But it would be just a different kind of problem. Like the problem here isn't that he's unpredictable or totally plastic. The problem is that he's actually pretty fucking predictable because he has one value.
Yes, all you have to do is figure out what's going to benefit him or what can he perceive will benefit him or is somebody smarter than him going to be able to make the case that it benefits him, and then he'll do it.
Yeah.
If Vladimir Putin sat down with Donald Trump for an hour and convinced him it was absolutely in his best interests to let the United States just join the Russian Empire, he would be coming back to America to make the case.
This is why I still have hope for single payer. Just get Bernie in a room with Trump, and I think
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all, and it's one of the reasons. Really, a side note here, what you mentioned about Ivanka.
Yeah,
that's another thing that I've been warning people about. Is I really think that the left should reconsider how they interact with Ivanka. Because, again, it doesn't matter that much whether or not you really like her as a person. The difference between Ivanka and Trump is that I think she does have some particular, probably center-left points of view. And she is, I think, out of everybody in the world, the most likely to be able to convince her dad of anything. He clearly, of all of his faults, the one thing that I will say is, and even though sometimes the words he uses concern me, he loves his daughter. Okay?
Oh boy, does he love her. Which different Greek word for love is it? That is the question.
Right. I mean, he does. And I think that she's the primary reason that Corey Lewandowski was gone.
Right.
I think that she had a lot to do with why Paul Manafort was gone. And I think that right now she's backing off on Bannon, but I find it so hard to believe that Ivanka wakes up every day and then thinks, thank God Bannon's there.
Well, what do you think about how the left should interact with her? Because, I'll tell you, I don't know. I don't trust her. I think that she has sort of these vague center left. But actually, the next segment in the show is about Ivanka. So, spoiler alert. But she may have these very, maybe even intentionally vague center left values, but they're bullshit. I mean, she's a Trump first. I mean, I think that
she's definitely a Trump first.
I think her center left values are just because that's what the socially acceptable move is in her milieu, right? Like, I think you put her in the White House long enough, she'll change.
I think she's vague about her positions. Actually, I think she's vague about her positions because they are center left.
I think she's vague about them because they're vague. I think
they might be vague, but to me, she's more like Jamie Lannister wanting to defend his family name, even though he has a serious problem with them. So to me, it's like she's trying to defend her family name or whatever. I think that's her obligation. It's not because I think she's this great person. I think she's a conflicted person. But really the key for me is whether or not she's a good or a bad person. I don't think anybody on earth has more influence over Donald Trump than Ivanka Trump. And if you already know that person at the very least has some vague center-left ideas, that's who you should be focused on, is sitting down with her.
Should we be nice to her then? Is that what you're saying? I think
to some degree you should be nice to her. Because the other fact of the matter is that people are influenced, whether or not they like to admit it or not, but especially people in her position, they are influenced by wanting to be liked in circles that they were previously liked. And Donald Trump used to go on every movie and television show in humanity, and nobody in Hollywood they thought he was an idiot, but they didn't care. They had a Comedy Central roast of him. He was part of the culture, and I think Ivanka enjoyed the fruits of that, and she got to go to the big parties, and she got to be invited to things, and she got to get her ass kissed. She's not getting that anymore. So
no.
Whether or not you're appealing to her vague center-left ideology or you're appealing to her need to be accepted among the elite, no matter what, there's a good chance you could influence her to influence him.
Yeah, I think that it's a matter of trade-offs, because I think what you'd have to compromise in order to influence her, I'm not sure if it's worth it. Because also, I'll tell you what else, like, who's going to be rushing to bow down before her and make her feel special is the center-right.
Yes.
And they're going to have a much easier time of it than
and that's one of the things that I will not know. To get back to, because I sidetracked. I didn't mean to do that.
We both did, but I want to get back to
the question of the Tea Party and the example they set. What I think that you have to be careful about is realizing, which I have realized over the last couple of years, that yes, people want to be led, but man, people want to be led. And if somebody steps into the position and they are loud enough and they are big enough and they have enough resources to make themselves larger than life, people get devoted. And then it is almost impossible to shake their view of this person they've become devoted to. And I don't know if this is like an overall human trait. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of this sort of cultist mentality that happens. I know that on the left, you guys felt it a little bit with the Bernie bros. And I know that on the right, we had felt it, at various times when we would have arguments, but never as much as when we saw with Trump. And so somebody could, if you don't have a leader that is really defining what the movement stands for, and then
and you're careful about who the leader is. I mean, that's, I think actually, if I can just refine your point a little bit about, being careful about being a leaderless movement, I think what happens if you consider yourself leaderless, then your leader will be chosen for you. Whereas what you need to do is choose your leader,
Yes.
And I would say like that's the difference with Bernie and Trump is I actually think that the left did the non-center left, the left did choose him, and unfortunately that just didn't work out. The center left felt otherwise, but.
Well, yeah. I think there's questions about y'all have your own establishment issues.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
And I think that played a huge role in how things ended up, how they played out.
Yeah.
But, I think just sorry to use Game of Thrones again, but yeah, you're going to end up with Cersei Lannister if nobody's on the throne. So.
I love the Game of Thrones references. I think with Trump and Ivanka, it's especially, we got a House of Lannister thing going on for sure.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's just the way it looks from the outside.
Right. No, I mean, look, she, I made the joke and I got a little bit of trouble for it online because I said, of course she has an office in the White House, he wanted her to be the first lady.
Well, I mean, you may get in trouble for that, but we can like take all of the innuendo out of that, and it's just still the truth. I mean, like we can revert to kind of like decorum here, and just say no, she's definitely the first lady. I mean, like,
oh, absolutely, she is, and I think Jared is just her proxy. I don't think Jared goes out and I don't think Jared meets up with Ivanka, talks about what is going to happen, and then Ivanka disagrees and Jared goes, well, I'm sorry, I know what's best. I just don't think that's what happens. I mean, he's the person who came into the family.
Yep.
So he's subservient to the family. And she, above everyone except Trump, represents the family.
Yeah. Although it's interesting, I mean, I feel people, I think, underestimate even Trump's capacity for selfishness when it comes to his family. Like, he's cut off family before,
Oh, absolutely.
Like
in fact, I think Ivanka's the only one he wouldn't. I think he cut off his sons.
Oh, in a minute, in a heartbeat.
Absolutely, I mean,
and I think Ivanka could. I mean, honestly, like maybe even Ivanka. He's divorced his wives. I mean, like
sure.
The guy's.
I don't know. She's the only one that I've ever seen. Like he's so like that's his most prized possession.
And it is a possession. Opinion. I think so.
Yes. It is a possession for sure.
It is. Now we're kind of getting into Lord of the Rings kind of territory.
Yeah, the innuendo stuff.
Yeah.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
What keeps you up? Me, state of the world, state of my pores, state of the country, state of the scale. What helps me fall asleep? The company I keep in my bedroom, my husband, my cats, and of course, super comfortable sheets. Parachute sheets, in fact. They sent me a pair, and you've heard me talk about them before. My husband loves them. It's one of the things we agree upon now. Still disagree about some stuff, including politics, but we agree about these sheets. They are the softest, comfiest sheets you will ever own. And they last. They last and last. The bedding is premium quality, so it only gets softer with time. I actually had this happen. Just put them through the wash a few times, and they do get softer. And they're made using the finest fabrics and materials in European regions, world renowned for manufacturing. Their beautiful design is clean and modern. The natural color palettes are inspired by Parachute's Venice Beach headquarters. And Parachute's direct-to-consumer business model passes savings on to consumers. There are no fire sales, no President's Day sales, no hidden fees. Visit parachutehome.com/friends for free shipping and returns with a 60-night trial. If you don't love them, just send them back. No questions asked. That's parachutehome.com/friends for free shipping and returns. And returns are donated to Habitat for Humanity. Visit parachutehome.com/friends for free shipping and returns with a 60-night trial. Ben, I really appreciate talking to you. We're going to have to close this off. I have more questions.
Okay,
but we're going to.
Sorry, I took us off on the Ivanka stuff, but I really think that all of it is so intertwined.
It is
in y'all's efforts.
Oh, it is, and I'm also thinking a lot about we didn't really get to the end of the conversation about could the left produce a Trump. Which I think may be an interesting one to continue to have. Before we go, though, I can't let this one question go unasked, which is that, do you feel like you've changed in the past year?
Yes. Well, I think I've always called myself, like you said, that your husband is socially liberal, fiscally conservative. Mm-hmm. I think that I am probably socially conservative. It's always just been a question to me of whether or not I feel the government needs to legislate my social conservatism. Mm-hmm. So I guess I would say I'm socially conservative, but in terms of governance, I'm more libertarian. But where I have changed a lot is how I interact with partisanship and with disagreement and with compassion and empathy.
Mm.
And I've been sort of toying with that for years, talking about how the right treats optics and how they act towards people and then are surprised they won't vote for them. After Romney, I said, what do you think? You're going to tell half the country they're lazy pieces of crap and then fly into their really poor area and tell them they're not paying enough taxes? Who's going to vote for that? So I've been toying with that for years, but now I've reached a point where I think that the only way to move forward is to affect the culture and to affect the people in terms of what they expect out of government. And that if we keep trying to fix things at the government level, like, oh, we need to get rid of this guy and add this guy or vote this guy out or recall that guy, like that's not dealing with the real problem. The real problem is that the people voted for these jackasses. And none of that's going to change as long as I'm going toe-to-toe with you over an issue that you and I will never agree on. Like, if we would never agree on abortion, why are you and I having this argument every day instead of talking about the things we do agree on and seeing what can happen? Mm. So I've changed in that way because I used to be very no compromise, and I'm just not that way anymore. And it might be just I'm getting old.
Can I ask a real specific question? Because I know with other people who went through a personal self-examination after Trump's rise, I won't name names, but my husband, but it
rhymes with my husband.
Rhymes with my husband. He hasn't listened to every episode, so sometimes I feel like I get to talk about him, but it's always a gamble. Like sometimes it's going to come back to bite me. Not that he minds. It's just I have to be careful to represent his views. But I think I'm going to be accurate here. Like he's reconsidered some of his fiscal views. I don't know how far. I can't say like how far he's moved or if he's moved at all. But like he's definitely willing to talk to me about, issues around taxes and healthcare in a way that he wasn't before.
I think that there are, I don't know that we would have the same specific issues, but there are some. Like, for instance, I had to take a long, hard look at abortion. Mm-hmm. Not the existence of abortion and whether or not I'm okay with it, but rather if there's half the country that thinks one thing and half the country that thinks another, and both sides are hoping to achieve certain things, what can we achieve together despite disagreement? And the first thing that I thought of, which really enraged a lot of people on my side, I said, I'm totally at this point for absolutely, completely government-funded birth control.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
When people challenged me on it, I was like...
That will reduce abortions.
Well, I mean, that was my point to them. Was it was like, you say that life is the most important thing. That's what you say. But then what? Fiscal issues are something more important at that moment? Like, let's say it's a bad thing economically speaking, but we can live with it, but it's bad economically. Okay? Let's say the right's bad, or excuse me, the right is correct, that it's bad economically. I don't care. I really don't care anymore. I still want it.
There's a value because your value is reducing the number of abortions, which is, by the way, like, again, like this is something you and I can agree on. Like, I think the tragedy of the pro-life right now is that they are going to see an increase in the number of abortions because of what they're doing.
Yes. Well, and this, I know that there's a lot of talk about smug liberalism. Like, I know you've seen all the articles talking about, like, usually from liberals talking about smug liberalism.
Yeah, it's whole, yes, go ahead.
And this will sound, I will almost sound like the typical smug liberal when I say this, but I have started saying this to people, and it does upset them when I say it, but they'll tell me, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to give any ground on this issue. And I say to them, well, let me just ask you, in the course of your life, if you were to compare the amount of time that you've spent picketing abortion versus the amount of time that you've spent counseling an expectant mother, where have you spent most of your time? And they don't like that question, because the fact is, I I think I probably was I was a little better about actually talking to people than some of my friends were. But it just occurred to me that if the extent of your counsel to someone who is considering an abortion is that you're a murderer, what have you achieved and how have you persuaded them in any way, shape, or form? How have you helped them? How have you made the world better? How have you contributed to abortions going down? You haven't done any of those things. All you've done is fight.
On this show,
I just think it's time to rethink that, which doesn't mean I have to change my views. In fact, I've argued that if I changed my views specifically because of Trump, then my views were the ones that were malleable. I haven't changed my views. I have changed the vehicle under which I think that my views might get a bigger audience and make more sense to people and stop being sullied by these shitheads.
And also, I think you've changed the way that I would actually give you even more credit about rather not about your views. I think what you're thinking about is outcomes and what your values are. And like, if your value is you want women to have fewer abortions, for instance,
yes,
then everything else needs to flow from that, right? And be information driven. And also you will find allies. You know?
Yeah, I know.
You will find if your value is I want to create a world, you know, where there are fewer abortions, like I'm going to stay away from like the language around it. We don't have to, because we're never going to agree about that, right?
No, of course not. But as long as the country, you know, the thing is, and I've said this to people too, they're like, I'm not going to stop fighting. I'm like, okay, let's say tomorrow, like, you know, they suspend all legislative filibusters and the Senate and the Congress passes a bill that completely bans abortion 100%, and the president signs it into law and the courts uphold it. What do you think happens?
Yeah.
What do you think happens really?
Yeah.
Because what I think happens is basically civil war. So
I think women die. That's what I think.
Well, and so my issue is, if you really believe, whether you're on the pro-choice side of it or the pro-life side of it, like whichever side of it you're on, if you really believe in all of your heart that you're right, then why does only 50% of the country agree with you? You're not making your case. Go make your case, because you can't just change everything with only half of the country behind you. It just doesn't work on something this fundamental.
And it has to be, on this show, I talk a lot about the program of attraction, not promotion, as the kind of evangelism that works for me and that I think works best in general. And I think pro-life conservatives do a terrible job of that particular kind of evangelism.
Yeah.
They
I mean, when the core argument, regardless of whether or not, like, you know, obviously you and I disagree on the language I'm about to use, but when your core argument is that you're talking about a human life, and by and large you're the demon in the argument, you've given a really bad case for what you're saying. You know, you people should at least, in my opinion, and this is one of the things that I've written about, people should at least be able to get to the point where they can disagree on something and understand where the other person is coming from. And we don't do that. You know, I've said to people on the right before, I've said, you know, you would be up in arms about your autonomy in any other scenario. You would be losing your mind if the government was saying you couldn't do X, Y, or Z with the doctor.
You can't get erectile dysfunction pills. You're not allowed. Like, we have to have a doctor make sure you can't get a hard on. The doctor has to be there to watch you.
You've got to have 4 witnesses, like, you know, and like, they would lose their minds. And I'm like, can't you, even if you think that the underlying things that are instructing their view are wrong, that's fine. But you do understand what they're saying, right? I mean, like, you get it. Y'all disagree on some underlying issues. That's the problem, is those underlying issues. But, you know, to claim that somebody who doesn't think the same way about it that you do is a murderer, that doesn't help the argument. You should understand where they're coming from. Now, I think the left has that same problem, you know, which is
The war on women problem.
Well, like I think that you could disagree. You could think somebody is scientifically a boob. That's fine. Oh my gosh, your scientific understanding is ridiculous and preposterous. Okay, that's fine. You can think that, but still understand where that motivation is coming from, because wanting to protect what you believe is a life is still a good thing. And then we can have the actual argument. Because right now I'm arguing for a life and you're arguing for autonomy, and we're not like having the same argument. And of course, we're at each other's throats.
Well, I think this is actually a lovely place to end our conversation, because I think we agree. And we don't often get to that place on this show.
Fantastic.
This went in a direction I did not expect.
Fantastic, baby murderer.
Woman hater.
Yeah,
I was actually going to say the war on women problem is, I think that I don't disagree about the idea of a war on women, but I think that the messaging is weird, because there are so many pro-life men who just don't think of themselves as hating women, and if you say like that's what you're doing, they're just going to shut their you're going to shut their ears.
I think that's the biggest issue with issues like this, is that some of the spokesmen on the left, just like the spokesmen on the right, sometimes are, wow, that guy seems like he's sitting in a Klan meeting. And then on the left, I think sometimes the issue is, okay, I understand what he's saying, but I just want to punch him so bad. And like, there's an issue on both sides with the spokespeople that get put out there, just being awful at it. And
well, that's why we need to not rely on spokespeople. I mean, that's why we need to actually speak to each other more. I mean,
right. And in terms of the politics and the governance, find people that can articulate what a movement is looking for. And I think, I still want conservatism to succeed, but I no longer want Republicans to. I want them to die a horrible, painful death. Not individually, but
well, hey, you know what? With the AHCA, you might get that wish. Like lots of.
Well, that's true. I don't think Trumpism is a pre-existing condition, but it could be.
Oh, but there will be plenty of Trump voters that are cut off from healthcare. So that's another conversation for another time.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, it was really nice talking to you, Ben. We will have you back, I'm sure. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to Ben Howe for being on the show. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Howe, BenHowe.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
I travel a lot for business, and have to do a lot of the booking myself, because here at Crooked Media, we're not totally together as a company yet. And I have found the best way to buy business travel. It is Upside.com. And if you're not a business traveler, you may know someone who is, so you have to tell them about Upside. Here is why I love it. At Upside, you save money on travel, and you get a free Amazon gift card worth hundreds of dollars every time. You get savings and a big gift card for free. And here's how they do it. Upside bundles your flights and hotel together for one low price. Bundling saves a ton of money, especially on business travel, because you know what? You're always going to need a hotel when you're traveling for business, because you're not traveling for fun. You're not visiting. You're going to a hotel. Your company saved money, and you still keep all your miles. And right now, when you use the code FRIENDS, my code FRIENDS, you're guaranteed a $100 Amazon gift card for your first time. That's my code FRIENDS and a $100 Amazon gift card. How can you not do it? Upside. Save big on travel and get a big gift card every time. That's Upside.com. There is a minimum purchase required, and see site for complete details. Next up is Brandy Jensen. She is an author of sorts. Actually, she said the only thing she's ever really written as a review is the thing we're going to talk about, which is her review for Broadly on Vice.com of Ivanka's new book. It is the talk of the town these days. Welcome to the show, Brandy Jensen.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am excited as well. I absolutely loved this piece you wrote for Broadly, Vice magazine's feminist vertical. I don't know what to call it, like the lady vertical.
Yeah, I mean they're sort of branded as the feminist vertical, I believe.
Yeah, well, that's what sounds so deliciously Freudian, don't you think? The lady vertical. Yes, I'm not jealous of anything. I have my own vertical.
I'm not like the other verticals.
But what I wanted to talk to you about, because it's the first piece I read about Ivanka's book, Women Who Work that brought up a very something that's been nagging at I probably other people as well for a long time, which is, why the fuck do we have such a problem calling Ivanka a feminist? Like, why is that an argument, right? Like, why can't we just say, no, she's not? And I'm going to quote you to you for the listeners.
Okay.
While the question itself is boring, the fact that we seem unable to say unequivocally no and move on is interesting because it reveals something about the state of mainstream feminism itself. The reason Trump has proven so confounding for many feminist writers is that they have a hard time admitting what she is, a conservative woman practicing liberal feminism. Boom. I just think I hadn't seen anyone else state it quite so boldly and baldly, which is that the problem with Ivanka is that it's not that she's not a feminist. It's not that she's problematic. It's that she is exactly what mainstream neoliberal feminism has produced. She is the logical end result.
The end point of what, to my mind, has long been this kind of, metastasizing feminist discourse, right? And we end up in really weird places where we are right now, where we have to talk about, is Ivanka a feminist? Is Kellyanne Conway a feminist? Can you be a pro-life feminist? We're asking all these, what to my mind are sort of deeply strange questions because, we've allowed the definition of feminism to become, sort of blurry to the point of meaning nothing.
Yeah, hashtag feminism, right? It's like Instagram feminism. And also, I want to put a provocative question out there, which is that, Ivanka is like the next iteration of Hillary in a way. Like,
yeah, I didn't really want to make that argument in the piece because I didn't want to deal with
you didn't want the trolls coming after you because you didn't want the Hillary people coming after you. Okay, that's fine. No one listens to podcasts, so like it'd be fine.
Well, here's the thing. I think it's undoubtedly true that like they exist on the same spectrum. That if you're going to sort of center your feminism around notions of success and ambition, you will eventually end up with somebody like Ivanka.
Mm-hmm. So I have a problematic relationship with Hillary, I guess, like every other modern feminist should.
Yeah, as do I. I was I've been called a brocialist many times, and probably true.
But I've always felt like my feminism makes itself heard about Hillary because I cannot let go of the fact that she is where she is because of her husband. Like that bothers me.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something, it bothers me, the idea that, you were never allowed to be critical precisely because she's a woman. Mm-hmm. We get into weird places with feminism when, if Margaret Thatcher was a terrible woman who had a great deal of power, right? But we're allowed to say she's a terrible woman. It's not anti-feminist to say that, Margaret Thatcher was a cunt. It's not anti-feminist to say that, there are some instances in which, Hillary had some problematic policy goals. Certainly if you are a queer person, you're allowed to question her rather late commitment to gay marriage, right? And if you care about criminal justice reform, you should be allowed to question her commitment to that.
She seems genuine thus far. It also feels like when I say that Ivanka is the next iteration of the logic of Hillary's feminism, it's because we allow success and power and femininity or femaleness to be the definition of feminism. Like if you are successful and powerful and you are a woman, then you must be a feminist.
Yeah, that's precisely it. It's this, and there are some selfish reasons why I'm, particularly suspicious of this approach, precisely because I'm a deeply lazy woman. And so this idea of fetishizing power and ambition to me has always, it's not something that I relate to on a personal level. But also, there are always going to be ways in which powerful women are complicit, right? You don't come out clean in these systems, especially, in a capitalist system. So, this idea that, gender parity in the boardroom is somehow a pressing feminist goal, to my mind, seems completely insane. Like these, if you think that rich, powerful women aren't going to pull up the ladder, I mean, that completely ignores the entire history of rich people and powerful people staying rich and powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And I think it's we really needed to do via Ivanka is not question Ivanka's commitment, which when you say like, and that actually becomes the only way that people criticize her, right? Is that she's a hypocrite or that she doesn't mean it.
Yeah. So we get into this weird place where we have to, sort of search the hearts of individual women and, does she really mean it or is she just saying it? And to my mind, I think it's, much easier and also more accurate to say it doesn't matter if she means what she says because what she's saying is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's sort of a funny thing that this book has, like, as I think you point out, sort of collapsed the metaphor about her because so much of what she says in the book is like kind of literally meaningless.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know how you have literally meaningless. I don't know what literally meaningless really means, but
it's like it's a TED Talk essentially in prose form, if you want to call it prose. The rest of it, the part that ostensibly is her, it's like if MasterCard wrote a memoir. I mean, it's just the weird ramblings of a brand.
Right. I mean, there's some great, some other great reviews of it have come out. Catherine Miller at BuzzFeed wrote one where she talked about, I guess, one term that somehow escaped mention in your column, self-purchasing, like women as self-purchasers, which of course sounds like fucking slavery.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
The lack of any sort of self-awareness is stunning, and people rightfully, hit on her Toni Morrison quote, which is just, there were a couple moments when reading that book that, my jaw hit the floor and I sort of thought like, oh, this bitch is doing it. Those were the only redeeming qualities of, the punishing experience of reading that book was the few moments of going like, oh, shit.
Right. And then the other one that
doesn't get it.
That other people have pointed out is when she talks about the westward expansion of the U.S. and how she
talks about westward expansion in a section about staking your claim in the workplace. And, she like literally goes into this little history lesson like, hey, did you know that in the course of U.S. history, you could literally go out there and stake your claim, which is, there
were some other people living on the land, but you know what? Like, as though there were no one else. There was no one else actually occupying the land first, right? Like that's
literally. I mean, I think I summed it up as manifest your destiny, bitches. That's essentially it.
So, I mean, I think you've raised the right question of whether or not we shouldn't be questioning Obama. We should be questioning her message and the message of neoliberal feminism in general. But I want to pose to you a question that my first guest made, or a problem or a situation he put forward, which is that he was like, hey, he's a conservative person, never Trump conservative person. And we were talking about what advice does the right have to the left as far as like this being our Tea Party movement, our Tea Party moment. And one of the things he said is that you guys should be nicer to Ivanka because she's your only hope.
Bullshit.
Now, for what's worth, I said something not as pithy, but I said somewhat to the same. But let's discuss that. Let's say why that's bullshit.
That we should be nicer to Ivanka?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the idea that she is somehow, like working behind the scenes to push a progressive agenda is just insane. There's no proof of that. And even if there were, it's not going to work. The idea that we should be pinning our hopes to Ivanka Trump to like somehow temper her insane authoritarian father's worst instincts, to my mind, is just, it's stupid. And I also, I deeply resent that a lot of the like go easy on Ivanka messaging is coming from men.
Mm.
It's, I mean, I'm sorry that, Chris Cillizza is horny for the blonde lady, but, this idea that we need to be nice to other women, this is also sort of a weird manifestation of this,
the Hillary,
in my mind,
stuff.
Wrong notion of feminism is that it requires you to support women unequivocally.
Mm.
And no, absolutely not. I reject that entirely. Ivanka Trump is, she's a cancer on our nation, and I'm not going to be nice to her.
What I find problematic about the idea that we should be nice to her, number one, there's no we, actually, like there isn't really a we to say be nice to, because you know what, the fucking mainstream media is pretty nice to her, the Chris Cillizas of the world.
Precisely. I mean, people have not been going in on her particularly hard at all. Like I said, you only need to look at the sort of media guys that are carrying water for her,
right?
And because she's hot,
and all. Then the defense, like, but she has to be loyal to her dad. No, you don't actually. Like, that's not. You can love someone from afar. Number one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry I love and respect many members of my family, and if I thought that if any of them behaved in ways even approaching the ways that Donald Trump behaves, I would get them professional help. I certainly wouldn't encourage them to run for president of the United States.
And if they were elected, like, I love my father-in-law. Sometimes he listens to the show. Hi, Bill. But if Bill was president of the United States, I wouldn't work for him. Like, that's just not, I mean, I don't think I would be doing more good from the inside. So there's the problem of there isn't a we to be nice to Ivanka. There's no, like, feminist.
Well, and that idea of doing good from the inside, too, sort of folds into this notion of neoliberal feminism that, we can change corporate culture from the inside, even though it's, structurally unjust, right? That feminism is something that we can, we can be complicit with these structures of power that oppress us and somehow change them from the inside. Like, that's not actually how power functions.
No, we are changed by power. I mean, and that's actually,
we just end up like recapitulating these same structures. We don't actually do anything to resist them.
And that's one of the reasons why this is ludicrous, the idea that, we should be nicer to Ivanka. First of all, there's the no we. And second of all, there's the people are already pretty fucking nice to her. And then the third thing is, I think that if the contest is if Ivanka is going to be swayed by whoever's nicest to her, she's not an ally worth having. And I don't think the left can suck her off nearly as well as the right can. I think that she's going to find herself pleasured plenty by the right, and she will move that way,
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean,
to the extent she can't move, we don't really know what her values are. So, whatever.
I don't think she has any value. Like, I really doubt that Ivanka Trump has any deeply held ideological commitments. She doesn't, I don't get the sense that she's that sort of person. I think she probably wants to be liked. She probably wants to be, written about nicely, and fuck her. She shouldn't get what she wants.
And that's not why hopefully not why you get into the business of government, which she didn't even really decide to get into. That's another sort of problem with this, which is that
that's one of the funny things about reading the book is, she has this sort of hastily thrown together preface about how she was writing it before the election results. And you get the sense that she in no way thought that her dad was going to win. Mm. She has this whole thing set up. Particularly, there's the end bit where she does this, gesture towards paid leave policies, and she talks about how we're going to have to continue fighting for them in a way that you get the sense that she means fighting a Hillary administration. Mm-hmm. And so, I've also seen this argument that she didn't want this life. She was sort of like pulled into it. Like, no, bitch, you can say no. You could have continued selling your, tacky wardrobe at, whoever would still agree to carry it. You didn't, she didn't get pulled into this. Mm-hmm.
This is a choice.
She gets to make decisions.
I want to name check another really great review of the book by Lori Penny in The Baffler, where she talks a lot about something you mentioned, and I want to just hit on before we have to wrap up, which is the idea of work as an ideology, the idea of work as a defining characteristic of neoliberal feminism, the idea that you have to work hard, that things are a reward for work. And there is this weird fetishization of that in our current, culture. I mean, I guess it's actually it's part of it's the Protestant work ethic. What am I saying? It's like not new.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, this is, fetishizing success is, one of the more deeply held American traditions.
And hustling and like, the idea that like we're here burning the midnight oil. Like there's, all this kind of work is the new play or whatever. I lived through the 90s. Like this was part of the bullshit that we had to put up with in Silicon Valley. But I just want to quote one sentence from Laurie Penny here that I really love, which is she describes the book as it's feminism for people who've been conned into believing that existing in a state of permanent sleep deprivation is the same as being woke.
Yeah, that's a good sentence.
It's a good sentence. And I think it's just really true. And that's something that's sort of where, to the extent that if we take this a little bit out of politics and talk more about Ivanka and her ilk and their influence on broader culture, we could still have, I think, a very edifying discussion of this book if she wasn't the functional first lady. And but that discussion would probably be centered around this idea that work will set you free, right? Like that's actually the problem.
That's part of it that, like I said, she's sort of, people understand that she's the wrong messenger, but what she's saying is a message that we are, willing to hear from other people. I mean, Netflix has that Girl Boss show that recently came out, and you've got, the idea of a CEO, which is a term that just gives me hives.
And apparently the person that came up with that was a sexual abuser of sorts. Like it's a woman who sexually humiliated the people that worked for her at Thinks, the Candies company.
That Thinks lady is wild. That entire story was wild.
Yeah, and she was being a sexual abuser in the sense that she just used sexuality to humiliate the people that worked for her.
Yeah, and again, precisely, this idea that powerful women should, are necessarily going to be good because they're women.
Mm-hmm. Not true. Not true.
Clearly false.
It reminds me, so I did an interview with the woman that started the Skim. What that is? It's like the kind of the creeping digestion of everything. It's a news digest that's written in the voice of like a millennial woman, and it was started by two millennial women. And there's lots of like what you can say at the cocktail party and what to say when people ask you about Syria. Like everything is written in like upspeak, I swear. Like it's not all terrible. Like some of it there's some decent explainership and analysis.
Yeah.
But I asked them about the tone of this newsletter, which is really upspeaky, like if that's possible in a newsletter, Yeah. Which I do too. I think I just did it there. So it's fine. But like I asked them, like, do you think being so heavily targeted at women and using this kind of trivializing tone where you make jokes about wine and Netflix and they, not being able to stick with a spin class for the entire, session, like, do you worry about that trivializing women, or somehow diminishing young women by making it seem like these are their values?
Well, there's something infantilizing about it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I asked them about it and they're like, but we're women.
Yeah, I mean, we really do. We really have.
They wanted to be a sponsor of the show, so I've got to be careful. So I guess I can kiss that goodbye. But capitalism sucks. So.
I mean, this idea that women can't be, an incredibly corrosive force for other women. Like, of course we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Nevertheless, he persisted in oppressing other women.
Oh, I unfortunately, like, I said this to Tom Frank when he was on the show, which is that I've thought about getting the Nevertheless She Persisted as a tattoo, which is a thing that some women have done.
Yeah, I've seen a few people get them as a tattoo. I mean, that's a choice that you can make.
Yeah, I just have a hard time putting Mitch McConnell's words on my body.
Well, like I'm sorry. Anything that came out of that, like, fucking turtle mouth is not something that I'm going to carry on my body for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'm going to wait for the next great slogan. Although I do like that one, but I got the t-shirt. Hashtag feminism t-shirt. Hashtag resistance.
But I mean, that's a great example of just how quickly this economy works. Is that, within 2 days, it was a t-shirt. It was some sort of outward signaling of an ideology that you can buy. And,
they're self-purchasing.
you can't, if they're selling something, they're not feminist, you know?
Okay, well,
you're never going to buy your way out of the patriarchy. You're just
okay,
not.
That's two different ideas. If they're selling something they're not feminist is one thing, which I disagree with, and then there's you can't buy yourself out of the patriarchy, which I do agree with. But I also, I got to have Tom on again just to talk about his original, thesis, which was the commercialization of dissent. And when we do try to buy our way out of feminism, like that, it is, capitalism is corrosive to truly radical ideas. That is true.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're clearly seeing the tide turning against consumer feminism, right? Like you've got, Gia Tolentino last year wrote that great takedown of empowerment feminism, and I think you can see people starting to be more aware that consumerism or like market feminism is a problem, and I think the next step is really interrogating how like capitalist feminism is a problem.
That is, yes, that remains the next step.
Yeah, and that's going to be the harder one because obviously it is this incredibly entrenched power structure and
something we Americans are not ready to think about. I mean, really. I mean, I wish we were, but
it would be nice. I mean, you're definitely most of my friends and people in my life exist pretty far on the left, and I think you are starting to get some recognition that is, not a completely untenable position. You're starting to get more support behind it. Medicare for all and Fight for 15, and to my mind, like these are the pressing feminist issues: is figuring out how to like improve the material conditions of women's lives. And so less focusing on, like I said, gender parity in the boardroom, less focusing on strength and more focusing on vulnerability, on vulnerable women. But, we need, these are the women that we need to be worried about protecting in this oppressive system, not cheering on the ones who made it to the top.
On that note, I would like to recommend that you use sponsor Books to send flowers this Mother's Day. You can use code FRIENDS and get 20% off your Mother's Day purchase. And I'm not even kidding. Okay, just
send flowers to your mom. Absolutely. That's a good reminder that I should too.
All right. Property is theft. And on that note, Brandy Jensen, it was great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks, as usual, for making it to the end of the show. If you enjoyed yourself, please rate and review us on iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And you can give us feedback as well. There is an email for the show that is withfriendslikepod@gmail.com and a Twitter, which is @crooked_friends. The folks on the show have Twitters as well. Brandy Jensen is @Brandy with a Y-L Jensen. That is @BRANDYLJENSEN. And Ben Howe is @Ben Howe, BENHOWE. You can also follow me on Twitter if you like. I am @Anna-Marie Cox. And we are going to be doing a roundup of sorts of listener questions in the next couple weeks. So please, if you have a issue involving relationships and politics or a difficult conversation that you want to have or have had or can't seem to bring yourself to have, please email that problem to the show. You can also include it as a voice memo if you like, or just write it out and I'll be in touch with you. And of course, if you're listening to this, you should also listen to every other podcast on the Crooked Media umbrella, of which there are many now. There is Love It or Leave It, there's Pod Save America, Pod Save the World, and Pod Save the People, the newest broadcast from DeRay McKesson. And I think you got Crooked Media every day of the week, my friend. So there's no excuse to go without your Crooked Media. You will have this Crooked Media production back next Friday. Thanks for listening.